Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven, a show about writing and publishing with your host, J.F. Garrard.
Welcome to another episode of The Artsy Raven. Today our special guest is Hadil Ghoneim, who writes in Arabic and English. She has written many fiction and nonfiction books for children and young adults. Her book, The Nights of Shaharzizi, won the International Award for Arabic Children's Literature, and Sisters Hana and Shefa was a finalist for the Best Picture Book for the same award. Her nonfiction essays for adult readers have appeared in Michigan Quarterly Review, Arab Lit Quarterly, and other publications. When not writing or playing tennis, Adil is engaged in community projects revolving around culture, dialogue, and storytelling. She lives in Ann Arbor, Michigan. So welcome, Adil.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Now, you've written across genres in both Arabic and English. What sparked your passion for storytelling in the first place?
Well, I think in my childhood, I was a consumer of many stories, storytelling, one of them, but also reading. So I read a lot, and then also in my professional career, I was a book reviewer. So I worked in a book review magazine where I was writing reviews of books and sometimes short, sometimes very short, and sometimes very lengthy essays. So I was always involved with books and stories and nonfiction, even before fiction.
Okay. Now, you write essays for adults, I guess, but you also write children's fiction. So how do you balance both of these things?
I think it's just it's a different form. Basically, when you write, you have something to say, and for me, the form is whatever makes it easier to say what I want to say, whatever makes me more liberated. And it was kind of a journey from understanding how fiction can actually liberate me into saying what otherwise would be hard. So, and also being between languages, sometimes there were things that were easier to write about in Arabic and other topics that were easier to write about in a different language, like English.
So how did you end up in Ann Arbor?
Oh, this is a personal story. Right now, I call myself a trailing spouse. My family moved here due to my husband's academic career. So we moved, and the lucky thing that writers don't have to be bound to one place. I continued to write and publish my books in Egypt while I was living in the US. So yeah, the mobility worked for me in that way.
Now, do you remember the first story you ever wrote? Was it when you were a child in Arabic or English?
No, I think not as a child. I don't remember writing stories as a child. I mean, reading, I remember reading a lot and being influenced by a lot of stories. And the first few stories I started writing, like the published stories for children, that started in 2006. And I didn't even know that it was in me. I was actually working in a publishing house where I was the editor of the children's books there. So I was editing other people's work, but then there were topics that we needed to cover. I was translating. I was doing something called localization. Like, for example, I did the localizing of Geronimo Stilton, which is written in Italian, but also we have the English scholastic version. And my publishing house, the one where I was working, took the Arabic rights. So this whole world I tried to localize into Arabic and Egyptian settings so our readers would understand and enjoy and be entertained by it. So this was something that I worked on, and then I started writing those first biographies. Like, I would storyfy. So, for example, the first book I published for children was actually a biography of a famous author, Naguib Mahfouz, who was a Nobel Prize winner in Arabic literature. and I personally love his work. So I storified his life journey into a book for children. So this was my first book.
Hmm. And then, yeah, and then you've written much more since then. And
Oh, yes. Yes. Um,
now, when you won the International Book Award, did that influence your career path going forward? Like, that was a big deal.
Yes, well, before that, I was also I wrote a middle grade novel with novella. It was a chapter book, and I think that was the first time I would write something of that length. And it was also shortlisted for the young adult awards, and that sort of gave me the push that I'm not just trying things, I actually can do this well, and that there's a readership for it, there's a need for it. So, and that maybe I do have the tools. So it just made me be more serious and intentional, and just more hopeful, because, that yes, I can dedicate a lot of my time for that, even though the publishing scene is not, it's not too great in Egypt, at least, and being
Yeah.
removed, and also being physically removed from the scene, living abroad. So this really gave me the confidence to continue. So this first recognition was in 2014. Later on, it just gave me license to do whatever I want. And really, I was interested in the Arabian Nights and how they are retold. And here in America, like even my child was watching Disney forms of Disneyfied stories of there from the 1001 Nights from Arabian Nights. And I was thinking, when was the last time I read a local retelling? Because we also have Egyptian authors who played with Arabian Nights and retold them. But over, it had been a while since I've read something, and I wanted to play with that myself, and try and retell it for children. And that was the book that won the award. It was the Children's Book Award of the Year in 2020, Layali Shaharzizi, where I sort of came up with a contemporary frame story for the stories that then are told.
Okay. Now, because you're bilingual, so what is your process like when you write in two languages? Do you start with one and you gravitate to the other, or you do a complete manuscript in one and then translate later?
That's interesting. So this book that if we're talking today about Arabic folk tales for children, my latest book, this is the only book that is bilingual in itself. But mostly I just it depends how I set myself. I write in one language or the other. I don't try to translate myself while I'm working. But in this book, it really it had to do with the sources, whether I found sources in the Arabic language or I found them first in the English language, and then I would start writing in one and then translate the other.
Okay. Now, how do you adapt traditional folk tales for modern readers while staying true to the spirit? Like, was there references you had to change? Like back in the olden days, they used different things or whatnot?
Well, in the first, so the book that we were talking before, this is an Arabic book. This is the one based on the 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights. This I had to change a whole lot because it was not even written for children. It was not appropriate at all. And it's huge, and there's a lot of redundancies and a lot of things that just don't make sense, or they're violent, or they're very violent, or very sexual, or just, not in the imagination of children. And the language is also very not contemporary at all. So this is where I really rewrote the whole thing and just used my own language sensibility and what I find fun and moving, but also I like the rhyme, so I kept the rhyming just so we have the mood, to keep the mood in this kind of narrative way, the storytelling way that we're used to. However, in my new book, Arabic Folktales for Children, which is bilingual and it's published here in America, this I was bound by that every story has to be told in English and in Arabic, and there's a limit. So I had to really choose stories or fables that would fit this short format. So this was the first guiding principle that made me filter through many stories. So what would be conducive to that and accessible for children who are of who would read a picture book at the end of the day. So it really had to do, I didn't change much in the stories, but I just had to, most of the work was actually in selecting the stories because you have hundreds and thousands. So it was the selection that was that took most of the work. But then writing it down, I tried to make it as straightforward and light and accessible and funny and entertaining as possible.
And now, I guess you had to do a lot of research to find the stories. Like, was it easier to do it in Egypt than online? I mean, because you're not, or are there academic libraries in Ann Arbor you could
Oh,
use?
of course. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
The libraries here are amazing. And so, yes, there are many folklorists and compilers of fairy tales and fables before me that I've sort of built on their work. So, and I think in my I write a little dedication, and I actually thank those who came before me in that. For example, Inya Bushnok has a collection in English. Dennis Johnson Davis, who I had met, he's a translator and an Arabist. He's Canadian, British, and he lived in Egypt, and I used to know him. And he also did a few stories, brought them from Arabic to English. And then there was also Amani al-Ashmawi, that was an Arabic collector and who wrote for children and retold some stories. And there are some that were oral, one of the stories actually, I don't think I've come across it at all. I think it's being written for the first time, as far as I can tell. I mean, you never know. But this was, I have a small internet community that I started because at one point, years ago, I wanted to collect fairy tales myself, to be like ethnographers who go from one village to another and collect a special subgenre of stories that Egyptian sociologists and ethnographers would call house stories, because there are those epics that are well written and recorded because they are maybe told in coffee houses or in courts where men tell them and know them and sing to them and maybe and write long poetic and poetry epics of those folk heroes. But then there are other stories that women tell at home, grandmothers and mothers, and so they like to call these house stories. And those are the ones that I felt at some point that, hey, they needed to be collected and saved, because now we're not telling stories. My grandmother told me stories, and my aunt. But those stories might actually, if they are not recorded, we might lose them, and they're part of our intangible cultural heritage. And I abandoned the idea, or it was never feasible for me to go from one village to another and collect them myself. But what I did thanks to the internet, is have this community, a group where me and my friends and their friends would just try to remember what stories that they heard as kids. And so one of them appears here in this collection. The Little Woman is actually a contribution by a member in this group, and it reminded me of a similar story that I have heard. So yeah. that
I was
was.
going to ask you, like, what inspired you to create this, but I think it is important to keep the cultural heritage alive. Like you said, a lot of it will be lost, especially if it's oral. Um, just won't be
Yes, and
around.
also even if so, there a lot is oral and a lot has is written, but again in a very inaccessible language. It's very important to keep retelling and rewriting those stories and selecting them to make them, especially at the point that we are in now. You know, we all have sensibilities, contemporary sensibilities that guide our selections and what is it that would make someone feel good now? What story seems to be relevant now? So we have to revisit this body of work and make it accessible in the language that we are using now. And so, yeah, I find stories fascinating because they travel. Well, I mean, they travel more than we travel, and they're not really bound by borders. So, yeah.
Okay, so what's next for you? Are you going to be writing more essays, or is there another storytelling project?
Actually, the book, what's next for me is a novel for adults. So it's
Okay.
completely, yeah, I like to go from one to another. Like, yeah, I'm not really, yeah, I like change and trying new challenges in writing. And so this is the novel that I've been working on for maybe 4 years now, and it's close to. It's actually close to, yeah, it's in the final revisions, and hopefully will be out next year.
Hi, Adil. So you're going to do a reading for us. Now, before you start, can you give us a bit of context?
Sure. Our This selection of folk tales includes about 8 stories, and some of them are pretty well known even outside of the Arab world. They are very well known in the Arab world, but what actually fascinates me about folk tales again is how they do not stick to one to borders as in our life now, but they are traveling texts. So the first story, which I might read from now, is Goha or Joha, who is in other cultures known as Nasruddin or Mullah Nasruddin, in Turkey, for example, and in other Asian countries. And in East Asia, he's known as Effendi or the Effendi. Stories by Effendi, and he even has a statue, maybe many statues all over. So and goes even into Sicily, known in southern Italy, and there he is also known as Giuffa. And in Egypt, we know him as Goha. So this is one of the most beloved folkloric characters, and we have a story from his Nawadir. And then there's also, I was happy to find and be able to retell a story from Kalila Wadimna. It's a tale about friendship. It's a fable of animals, different animals, and the interesting thing is that they also come from from Indian origins, from Sanskrit origins, but then they were translated centuries, yeah, the Panchatantra, but they were translated into from Persian to Arabic by another medieval bilingual author, and that's how we have them now. And they also influenced European stories like La Fontaine when he did the fables. He also acknowledged that he was influenced by those stories. So again, even though they are Arabic stories, but in themselves, they tell us of how connected we are. We all are actually, and that I'm hoping that people would see that or recognize it. So yeah, here's the wise fool, Goha, and I'm going to read the first story in my collection. One day, Goha decided to go to the market. His young son came up to him while he was getting the donkey ready. "Please, father, take me with you to the market," he begged. Goha agreed, and the three of them started off on foot. After some time, Goha noticed that his son looked tired. He stopped and said, Take a break, my son, and ride the donkey. You're not used to walking all this way like I am. The boy was happy to ride the donkey, and the Goha walked beside them. Little by little, more people started to appear on the road, and some stared at Goha and his son. One man said loudly, "Poor Goha, how can that little boy sit like a prince on the donkey's back and let his old father walk? Children these days don't know anything about respect and good manners." The boy felt ashamed. "Please, ride the donkey and I will walk," he said, hopping off the donkey. Goha agreed and climbed on. The three continued on their way. Very soon, they came to a woman who stared at them and said, "Poor little boy, look at that grown man riding the donkey and leaving his young child to walk. Fathers these days are so selfish." Goha didn't seem bothered by the woman's words, but the boy felt bad for his father and asked him to stop. "Please, let me ride the donkey with you," he said. Goha agreed. He helped his son back onto the donkey, and the three of them continued on their way. Soon they came to a fruit seller. He gave them one look, then yelled, "Poor donkey, how can it possibly bear the weight of two? What a cruel world! There is no mercy in people's hearts anymore." The boy blushed. He whispered in his father's ear, "What can we do so that everyone is happy?" Goha said, "What if we both walked and carried the donkey?" His son thought for a few seconds, then burst out laughing, imagining what that would look like. "People will say we're idiots." "Exactly, because only an idiot thinks he can make everyone happy. Don't worry about what they say, my son, and keep going." So that is the first story. Of course, in the book there are, I don't know if you can see the illustrations, but there are many illustrations, very beautiful by my colleague, wonderful illustrator Aya Khamis. And and there are other many stories. Maybe we cannot read from them, but there's actually audio files on the website of for the book on Tuttle. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much for spending time with us today.
Thank you for having me.
The Artsy Raven is produced by Dark Heel Express. Introduction voiceover by Chris Gorman. Music by Tim Moore. Please access your bonus content on the Patreon website. Thank you very much for listening, and please stay safe.